Welcome back from that break. If people are looking for seats, those are not open, I don't think. Let's see, we got one up here, one over there. There's one over here. People can fill in if they want to take a seat. Okay. It's been an exciting day so far, and it's only going to get better. So we've got a panel discussion coming up here, led by Scott Siegel from the Helium Foundation. Cheers for Scott. We've also got someone named Amir Haleem, who a few of you may have met, who is the CEO of Nova Labs. And then we've got Anatoly, who's a co-founder of Solana. So let's give them all a round of applause.
All right. Hopefully everybody had a good break, get some water, coffee, and those bows that were back there. So we're lucky. This is a really fantastic discussion that I've been looking forward to for most of the morning and into the afternoon now to talk with both Amir and Anatoly Yakovenko, who is the co-founder of the Solana network. Let's talk a little bit about HIP-70. So before we get into it, we got a big crowd of wireless enthusiasts here, obviously, but probably talk a little bit about, talking about your background and kind of share where you actually came from that space yourself.
Yeah, I spent over a decade at Qualcomm. I was there from flip phone mobile days to megabyte devices with a 2-inch screen. I actually worked with Mark Neidham, CTO of Helium, for a good chunk of that. And when I first started working on crypto, I think it was really painfully obvious to me that wallets and how crypto should be done by the device that you hold in your hand. Should be mobile friendly, and treated as a first-class citizen in mobile. So it's always been just on top of my mind, how do you merge these two technologies? Obviously, I'm excited about Saga and the phone, but very excited about Helium and the possibility that Helium could disrupt the wireless industry. Just that concept is blowing my mind, that there is that we might be able to have a people self-built, bring your own device, bring your own carrier network. It would be very transformative for the entire industry.
So we're here to talk about HIP-70. Amir, do you want to, this is something that we talk about, this has been in the works for such a long time. Not even necessarily even last year, probably even goes back to the original inception of the network. You want to talk a little bit about kind of how we got to where we are, all the inputs that led to HIP-70, and then how that kind of came together from the core development team?
Yeah, so back in 2017 when we started building Helium on the blockchain version of Helium, really the only live network at the time was Ethereum that you could realistically have built something like Helium on top of. Back then, we were already worried about the cost of using the network. We just felt like the gas fees were going to get out of control. We didn't really understand how we were going to manage it. So we actually interviewed Anatoly to come work at Helium. But he had a white paper for something called Loom. It was in a Word doc, or a Google doc maybe, and it talks about proof of history. And then you didn't take the job anyways. So, but back then, we were already having the conversation about how would we do this going forward? How would this continuously live and grow and evolve? And actually, Anatoly was one of the very first people who was advocating for the model that is described in HIP-70, where a lot of the stuff happens off-chain and is kind of oracled back onto the chain. So to me, it's a very logical progression, right? Today, the L1 that we have is this very complicated, very brittle, amalgamation of all of this stuff, right? Proof of coverage logic is in there, data transfer logic is in there, the L1 itself, in terms of validation and block creation is in there. And I described it to someone earlier as a gigantic Jenga tower, right? If we want to change one thing, the whole thing wobbles and makes it really, really difficult to iterate quickly and fix problems that we find. So separating all of that out into like its constituent parts, so that proof of coverage is its own thing, so that data transfer is its own thing, and that the L1 is its own thing, has always been something that we've considered and wanted to work towards. And then once you sort of break apart the system like that, it becomes a question of like, well, why would you continue to operate your own L1? Like, you get none of the benefits of being part of a bigger ecosystem like the Solana one. You don't have any compatibility into things like DeFi and NFTs and like all of the interesting stuff going on across crypto. And it takes an enormous amount of our engineering resources. Like, we spend, I don't know, it's got to be like 70+% of our engineering time to date has been like firefighting like what I would call problems with the L1, just because we made some design decisions that I think were good ones at the time, but didn't scale like at all, right? So like as the network got to be close to 1 million nodes, you had 1 million peer-to-peer connected nodes like all trying to do stuff. And it's just a nightmare, and you just don't need to do it that way. So learned a lot over the years. The landscape of crypto has changed significantly. You've got stuff like Solana now that exists, which didn't exist when we started, and it just, to me, makes total sense to take advantage of what Solana is great at, combined with what we're great at, so that we can be more focused and just get on with what we're really about.
That's great, and I think we'll come back a little bit around to kind of like how the team really came around again through their, like, you know, it was a long, thoughtful process. We obviously saw this from the foundation side, how you guys came around to Solana ultimately, but to bring it back over to Totally, why don't we talk a little bit about kind of like the current state of things at Solana right now, where you guys are really prioritizing your resources. Maybe even talking a little bit, again, like one big piece of news that came out from your side recently was the second validator client. So maybe touching on like, why is that important? Why does that matter? Why people should be like thinking about those types of things?
So the most important thing that we're working on is reliability and performance. And there's always a tension between both of those. All of our engineering time is spent on that. And the second validator client is a real important piece because if you have a bug in layer 1 software and you only have one client, that one bug can bring down the entire network. It could be catastrophic state destruction as well. So these are like the bugs that keep me up at night. And no amount of audits and like reviews and things like that can guarantee that none of those are present. But with a second client built by a separate team, with a separate language, totally designed outside of labs, there's a very low possibility that they would build the same bugs. That if there's a bug in one, there's virtually zero chance that there's a bug in the other one. So that amount of reliability really creates like order of magnitude more safety, and that is why I'm going to be able to sleep at night once the second client ships. What's really cool about this specific second client is that it's built by the Jump Crypto's high-frequency trading team. So these are the folks that have spent day and night optimizing software to handle 40 gigabit, 100 gigabit plus of real-time market data. And we have the same challenges as them. And their goal, you know, when we started building Solana, we just wanted to demonstrate that it could work at a 1 gigabit network. Their goal is 10 gigabit and above, and that's millions of transactions per second of throughput. So not only are they increasing the safety and reliability of the network by simply having a second implementation, they get to see the maze from both ends and get to optimize this thing from the ground up. Basically build it the way I would have wanted to build had I had infinite resources and time. So I'm very excited about the work that they're doing.
That's excellent. I mean, obviously that type of thing in terms of reliability fed into the decision from the core developers as you guys were working through the proposal of HIP 70. You know, some of the biggest parts that are really kind of the off-chain components. So, you know, thinking about how you guys put the proposal together, a little bit of how you arrived at Solana, but also thinking about some of the implications that folks should be mindful of you know, by moving proof of coverage off-chain, by moving data transfer off-chain, what that enables and opens up that's been kind of a bottleneck so far.
I mean, if we do it well and correctly, the only thing that people should really notice is that everything is better. Today, we're limited by how many transactions can reasonably be processed for proof of coverage. It's a very performant system. It's just a very, very hard, big, complicated problem to solve. So today, there's a realistic sort of limit of how many transactions you could fit in a block, so you can really only get away with 300 maybe POC transactions each block every minute. So those kinds of hard limits will basically be gone. Like the actual computation is really not that complicated as soon as you take it out of a blockchain. So you should expect that proof of coverage is more frequent, is more reliable, is more consistent. RF already is very inconsistent. And so adding in the inconsistency of a blockchain to it makes it even harder to understand what is going on. And we know from the years of doing this that consistency is one of the most frustrating things for users to not be able to understand. It's like sometimes it does this, sometimes it does this, no one knows why. So getting proof of coverage to be reliable and consistent we think is super important. Also helps people optimize deployments, get much more real-time feedback. We think that matters a great deal. It also allows us to iterate more quickly on problem solving. Also allows the community to iterate more quickly on problem solving. So when bugs or improvements are suggested, it won't take us months to implement them because we won't be scared of exploding the chain at the same time, which is kind of where we are now. There's so many things that we've wanted to do with proof of coverage that we just haven't been able to do because of how complicated the system is. So excited for that. Same story on data transfer. Should be faster, should be more reliable. A big part of what we're trying to do also is integrate more deeply into the LoRaWAN ecosystem. So there's a very big ecosystem of LoRaWAN network servers, for example, like companies like Amazon, Senate, Actility, like guys that do enterprise-grade LoRaWAN service that we now will be much more compatible with. So we think that's a big part of it. And then on the L1 side, I don't know if you guys have used Solana much. I'll admit I hadn't used it that much until recently. And the speed of the transactions is like kind of mind-blowing once you use it compared to any other network, especially compared to Helium today. So I think users are going to be excited from like the wallet point of view just to be able to interact in like almost real time and also be able to use HNT and mobile and IoT in completely different ways, right? Stuff like DeFi. I think Helium will probably be the largest NFT mint on Solana when it occurs, so every hotspot will become an NFT, and you guys have all sorts of interesting marketplaces for that. So there's all kinds of stuff you're now going to be able to do with Helium when it becomes part of a bigger ecosystem. And so those are some of the things that we're most excited about. But ideally, no one knows that it happened, and it just feels better and faster. And the migration is ideally seamless and doesn't require any user interaction. That's what we're going for.
That's great. And I mean, one of the things that excites me from the foundation perspective is just opening up to such a larger developer ecosystem and opening up, more possibilities for work, more contributions. So, a question back to Toly is, you guys have, I mean, I don't know how we would track this, and Austin's out there somewhere, but if the fastest growing developer ecosystem, one of the fastest, if not the fastest. What's made you guys success? Like, what have you done that's made you so successful that there's such a rush of talent?
If I knew, I honestly don't know. It's not a secret. I think we've just been lucky in a lot of ways that we built technology that people wanted and enabled them to do something interesting and something new at a time when a lot of the competitive chains just wanted to take Ethereum and run it in a new consensus algorithm. So we this was simply because we didn't have enough funding. We had to build only the one thing that we knew was important, and that ended up being the right decision. And because of that, we've seen this kind of snowball effect when new developers build an application on Solana and it gets traction. A lot of their peers see, oh wow, that worked and that wasn't that much work. So they try it, and we kind of see this almost like budding ecosystems around the world. And we've done, I don't even remember how many hacker houses at this point. Like, I think over 50, if I'm not mistaken, with nearly 20,000 folks that have been through them. And these are devs that just want to see, like, can I build a MVP in crypto? And 1 out of 10 of those, that MVP ends up being a funded company. So it's been really amazing to see like this flywheel going.
So the idea of, again, Helium being its own sovereign L1 right now is required, the ecosystem and Nova and everything really being built kind of from within and almost insular, not as a feature. If you think about the idea of moving over to another L1, especially again a general smart contract platform, this is a good question for both of you. What's the stuff that I'll start with you, Amir. Like, what's the stuff that you're really excited about of things that we just either didn't have the resources, the features, the tooling wasn't there yet, but like moving to a general smart contract platform, like what does that open up? Like, I'm almost going to ask that question as Helium Foundation giving out grants for things that are going to improve features and tooling, what are the things that you're most excited about potentially in smart contracts?
I mean, at a high level, I'm excited about the fact that we get to focus on building networks and growing the demand side, growing the supply side. Like, that's really what we're here for. I mean, today, the Helium community and Nova reasonably does what 4 or 5 companies should probably be doing if it were to be split up that way. And so being able to just focus on one thing that matters, I think, is super important. I think access to like the developer ecosystem that Solana has is going to be like really interesting and really exciting. We won't be the only entity that can reasonably make serious changes to the protocol, and I think that's very, very important. And it's going to enable a lot of small stuff. I mean, like hotspot hosts, for example, have been asking for years for a way to split payments to their hosts, right? And today that would be something that we would have to write a specific transaction type for and like enable in some complicated way. And so once moved to Solana, it would be very, very straightforward for someone. It wouldn't even have to be us. Someone could just create that, the ability for like, you know, take the token rewards and just split them up across the various hosts based on the work that they did. So it's just going to be a whole world of stuff that honestly I can't predict, which is the most exciting part of it, right? Is like I think one of the most interesting things about building platforms is that people do things you don't expect, and we've certainly seen that in the Helium community already, and I think we'll see like that amplified and accelerated like to the extreme once we move over to something like Solana, assuming that the vote passes, although it looks pretty good right now.
Totally. Any thoughts on things that you just off the top of your head, and thinking about smart contracts enabled with a wireless infrastructure? What types of things do you think we could be doing?
So for the decade that I worked at Qualcomm, it was always very frustrating how unprogrammable carriers were. Like how there was complete lack of any way to configure networks or topologies. And you know, while we were building Solana, one of the pitches that we did, and we went to every carrier in the world, is imagine, you know, you have a user, they purchase a high definition movie from Netflix. Netflix bids for the highest quality 5G network that's near that user to provide service, and the user doesn't even know that that's happening in the background. And that's a couple trivial smart contracts. But this is basically impossible to do in any major carrier today. But I think this is something that could potentially be very disruptive and really change how the whole wireless industry in the United States.
So changing gears a little bit to stuff that's more around governance. I know there's a lot of things that are happening around kind of DAO tooling as well on Solana. Again, where from our perspective, and I think this is something that like every blockchain ecosystem struggles with in general, as far as not just the frameworks for governance, but even the tooling around that, in a way of distributing authority and becoming more permissionless in nature. Can you speak a little bit to like some of the stuff that's like being built up on Solana in terms of like the stuff that's on the governance side of things and some of the DAO tooling features?
Yeah, there's a governance platform called Realms, as well as Nation and Squads. There's a bunch of different front ends, but the underlying protocol we call SPL governance that's being developed by one of some Solana Labs folks in conjunction with ecosystem partners. And I think it has over $1 billion in management right now, and basically services Mango Markets, Serum, a whole bunch of foundations. And it's a fully programmable interface that lets your governance, your token holders call any smart contract, do arbitrary computation. So it's very flexible to kind of accomplish whatever you guys need. So as far as, again, kind of setting first of all, a reminder to everybody, the vote is still open. Please make sure you're voting. Got a little over a day left, so it's partly why we're up talking about this, to make sure that we are informing and educating beyond the town halls that we've been having, the AMAs. Keep the discussion going, obviously, in our HIP 70 channel in the Helium Discord. But as far as other things around kind of, like expectation management for Amir, simpler things for folks in terms of like, what is a wallet interaction going to look like? Do people need to worry about moving a token over? So for your average hotspot host, what are the things they need to keep in mind? Anything they need to be concerned or mindful of, assuming the vote goes through?
I mean, if we do it properly, which I'm obviously hopeful we do, no one should really have to do anything. I mean, one of the important things about Solana and Helium is they share the same private key type, which makes it possible for us to move the entire ledger from one place to another while people keep their same 12 or 24 word seed phrase. We thought that that was super important, right? Like as soon as you had some kind of like migration assistant, the number of ways that that could break is high, especially just from scams and phishing and like, you know, total nightmare of like enter your 12 words here to like migrate to Solana and all your HNT is gone. So we wanted to try and make it as seamless as possible. So one of the things that was important for us as we were evaluating different L1s was, is there a way to know using a Helium address what the corresponding L1 address on the other chain would be? And fortunately, both Helium and Solana are very similar that way. So we're able to say, okay, if you have Helium address A, then we know it is going to be Solana address B. So when we migrate the ledger, we just move A to B, and we know that your same 12 or 24 words are going to work on Solana. So our wallet, the wallet app that we use, will just update one day, assuming this all happens. And you'll be on Solana. And ideally, you wouldn't really notice anything other than your public address might be a little bit different looking, and things will be really fast. And that would be about the main set of differences. Hotspots will become NFTs. Functionally, shouldn't really change in terms of the way they behave. So in general, we expect it, or we hope that it will be very, very seamless, and that no one will really notice much has changed during the migration, except they'll start to be able to like participate in this bigger playground, basically, after the migration's done.
Got it. So, again, it's a little outside the scope of HIP 70, but I think it's certainly relevant. I'm sure many people in this room know about the Solana Saga phone. Totally, I don't know to what degree you can speak to that versus, again, I don't know where it sits within your organization, the separate organizations that are running that. But a little bit of just kind of what was the origin story there, and what was the kind of, what do you think of kind of like the ultimate kind of like utopia goal with a kind of Web3 first phone, and how you guys thought about driving that forward?
Yeah, so the goal for that device and the software stack is really twofold. One is to fix a fundamental problem for users around security and user experience with wallets. And the other one is to give developers a platform, a mobile platform where crypto is treated as a first-class citizen. And the Solana mobile stack is the technology that Labs is building. And the partner that we're using to build the first device, the OEM, is awesome. Literally awesome.
That's actually the organization's name.
Yeah, it's a company founded by an amazing hardware builder, Jason Keats. He was an architect of iPad Pro. He's built like James Cameron submarine door, like a real hardware geek. Races cars, like doesn't know software, but it's awesome to work with them. And the real key pieces of technologies there are the seed vault, which stores your seed phrase inside the secure element. This is a piece of hardware that's on every device already. This is where your biometric scans are stored when you do Face ID on your phone. But it's just not enabled for crypto. So the software that we're adding allows you to do key recovery, so secure BIP39 key recovery. And that requires code in the trust zone that can take over the display. So you know that no application can fake that prompt, that this is a secure place for you to put your keys, phrases in, or read your key phrases from. And that's a very important piece. And once you have that, you can then actually give developers more tools, more power. The biggest fear for any wallet developer is that they somehow make a mistake and leak the seed phrase. Well, if the seed phrase is hidden inside the trusted element, that's no longer possible. They can actually build better wallets, more rich applications, and like really build an amazing mobile experience for users. As well as, you know, one key component there is an app store that's crypto first. And this is a fundamental difference for business models from Web 2. You simply can't take a user-generated digital item that's a true digital asset that's not owned by the platform, that's owned by the user, and charge 30% on the sale of this thing inside your mobile device when you don't charge 30% on desktop. There's no way Magic Eden can charge $13,000 for an NFT that's $10,000 to a desktop user. So those business models just don't make sense. And this is something that we're fixing as well in the SMS stack.
That's great. It's super exciting time for it. So Amir, as far as, again, last time I think I looked at the vote, we were somewhere, again, I'm just ballparking, I think it was like 9% in favor right now. So if things continue on that track, what should people expect, the vote passes, what should people expect as far as, a near-term roadmap, timelines, kind of what's the Nova team going to be focusing on from a development perspective, assuming this goes through?
We've already put significant work into the Oracle part of the problem, right? So building the proof of coverage oracles, building the data transfer oracles. To me, that's probably the hardest part of the equation, is like figuring out how to break apart the current system. And so we've spent a lot of time on that already, are fairly far down the path, because that was always agnostic to the L1 choice, like whether we stayed on our own L1 or moved to Solana or moved to Algorand or something like that. That would have been the decision that we would have made anyway, or that we would have proposed. So a lot of work has already gone in there. The Solana side of it needs a bunch of work that hasn't started yet, or is, I think, about to start if the vote passes. I'm still optimistic that this year is doable, at least in some working form. Whether that's the full, mainnet migration or not, I don't know. But it should be doable. The Solana contract side of it should be reasonably straightforward. It's mostly the function of creating HNT and mobile and IoT tokens on a schedule, distributing them out based on what the oracles tell them to do, the ability to redeem mobile and IoT tokens for HNT. Like, that's kind of the part that lives on Solana. And so, yeah, optimistic that we should be able to get there this year, but we'll see. I think we'll be able to anticipate a little bit better once the vote is finished and we really get into it. I mean, a lot of the devil is in the details in terms of how you implement this and how you make it an easy migration. So we'll find out soon, but still aiming for this year.
So I've got two of the top leaders in crypto up here on stage, and if I think about just the paradigm shift that's happening right now, in terms of things that are happening at a policy level, look at things from a talent perspective, when you both kind of zoom out from obviously business and protocol priorities, what's the stuff that's like really important to you as far as the right type of narrative that like both projects, or even any blockchain project in general, where we can create more of a tide raising all boats type of situation of like, what should we all be thinking about and kind of working collectively on as an industry, if you will, that stuff that is either existential risk or better ways that we can explain to folks that aren't yet in the ecosystem why they should be getting involved?
I think a lot of these networks succeed when their users have real ownership, right, of the network itself, and able to participate in every part of it. And to me, that starts with self-custody, like having folks that actually generate those seed phrases, figure out how to store them, and figure out how to use them, and then run validators, run Helium hotspots, and really feel like they're part of something that is an organic growing technology. And very, like I grew up in the 90s, I was an open source geek. I love the idea of Linux taking down Microsoft, and that a bunch of people coding on the weekends could compete with like a $1 trillion tech company. But that actually is true. That works out. Linux is the most dominant operating system now. So I don't remember the last time I even used Windows. So that true ownership and giving people control of their technology is really, really important.
Yeah, I would say the same. I mean, it's part of what has made Helium successful, obviously, is this like real ownership of the infrastructure, and that feeling of being able to participate in something that is sort of changing the traditional status quo, which people in general aren't necessarily thrilled with, or doesn't give people the options that they need. From like a macro level, like these crypto winter cycles are always kind of interesting. Like they flush out a lot of projects. And I think that helps the entire crypto space get a little bit stronger. The project, when both Helium and Solana launched, was probably the worst period of time I can remember like now doesn't even really feel like anything. Like this feels luxurious in comparison to where we were then. And I think the teams and the companies and the projects that were around at that time just got so much stronger and so much better as a result of like really having to go through this process of building absent, being worried about markets and speculation and stuff like that. So I think we'll see some really, really good stuff come out the other side of this round of a crypto winter. And I think that's important. There's still a lot of like negative speculation about crypto. Like I think people still view it or perceive it potentially as a scam, and there's a lot of potential negativity out there, and I think we need to see more and more user-focused, real-world applications that kind of change people's mind about how valuable this piece of technology is.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue into again the importance of driving the right types of narratives, focusing on value. I think is like third crypto winter. So I think everybody is kind of battle tested who's been in the industry for a while, but telling the right stories. A good reminder that Helium Foundation is hiring for 2 communications roles. But in general, I'm really excited to see how this ends up. Again, it's about a little over a day left to vote. Please be sure to participate. But thank you both for making the time to come up and talk a little bit about Solana and also our plans for post-HIP 70, assuming things carry on as they are. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.